Welcome to another episode of Rust Admin Academy, where I teach you all the tips and tricks to owning and operating your very own successful Rust server. I was recently asked by one of the fans of the channel to show exactly how to build, well, in this case, it was a specific 5x server or a 5 times gather rate server. And so I'm going to do that on this video. But just know that the same processes can be used to make whatever rate you want, whether that be 1, 2, 3, 10, a million, whatever you want. You can use the exact same processes explained in this video. If you're brand spanking new to the channel, you've never been here before, make sure you subscribe. And if you're a returning viewer and you haven't subscribed yet, come on. Like, what's wrong? You know you want to do it. All right, let's get into the video right after my 7-second intro. All right, so the three main plugins that we're going to use to create our 5 times server are GatherManager, StackSizeController, and MagicLoot. GatherManager changes how much resources you get from each thing that you're gathering resources from, whether that be a tree, a node, or a pickup, or whatever it is that you find on your server. So this also includes animals, humans, whatever else will give you a material once you're harvesting it. The second plugin I suggest we use is StackSizeController, because the more we're giving when we're collecting resources, the higher the stacks are going to get faster. So basically what that means is if somebody's chopping down a tree or breaking down a stone node, they can very quickly fill up their inventory just with that one thing. So we're going to give the stacks a boost so that they can collect more resources because we're giving them more resources. The third plugin that we're going to discuss in this tutorial is MagicLoot. So we're going to also increase how much loot you get from breaking barrels or opening boxes. So I've already downloaded all 3 of the plugins, and I'm just going to quickly drop them into the plugins folder. And then we're going to go into the config file for each one of those plugins and make it do what it is that we want it to do. So as you can see here, we're looking at the default config file for GatherManager. It's not showing any multipliers in there whatsoever to change the gather rate. So we're going to go through the process of changing those gather rates. So we can make these changes very, very quickly using our console, our server console. So by doing gather.rate and then dispenser, and then we can put out our multiplier. But here's kind of where you need to pay attention. So we can either do gather rate dispenser, and we can do wood at 5 times, or we could do stones at 5 times like that. Or we can do everything all together. So we just do an asterisk and we make everything at 5 times just like that. So you've set the gather rate for asterisk, which is everything, to 5 times from resource dispensers. Now we also want to do the same thing for pickups as well as for the quarry. And we simply do that by typing in gather.rate pickup asterisk 5. And you can see the pattern here. We're going to do gather rate quarry asterisk 5. All right, so now we've changed all 3 of the things that we need to affect gather rate. And if we go back into our config file, we'll notice that now it's changed and it shows the 5 times multiplier that we've now added to all 3 of those things, as you can see in the highlighted section right here. You'll see down at the bottom there, there's also survey charges we can control. And if you've added survey charges to your loot table, then yeah, it makes sense to add a multiplier there. I don't on any of my servers. I don't add the survey charges back in. And as you well know, they no longer have a use in the game because we can't place our own quarries anymore. So it's really no longer required. But like I said, you can do it if you want to. So the next plugin I want to go over is StackSizeController. Now that we're giving more resources as we're farming, we want to be able to put those into taller stacks in our inventory so we don't fill up our inventory real fast. So I've actually already done a tutorial on StackSizeController. I'll put a link for it up above in the top right hand corner if you want to watch that video. It might go a little bit more in depth as compared to what we're going to go over today. This is our default config file for StackSizeController, and we're just going to do the fast method of changing these stack sizes. Like I said, in my previous video, I showed you how you can manually control each individual stack size, but for this tutorial, we're just going to do it the quick and dirty way. And we're going to do that by changing this line right here. So we've made it so that all resources are multiplied by 5 times as you're farming them. So let's make your stack sizes 5 times as well. So we know that everything stacks, wood, stones, metal ore, everything stacks to 1,000 by default. So let's just change this to 5,000. And it's as simple as changing that line right there to 5,000. And then we'll save this config file and we'll reload the plugin in our server. Okay, so confirmed that our stack sizes for resources are now at 5,000 per stack instead of 1,000 per stack. While we're in here, because we know we're also going to change the loot table, why don't we go in and change the stack sizes for components too, just to make that easier. Now, this is where you're going to have to make a decision because some of the stack sizes for components are different. Some of them are 20. I think some of them are 25, others are 50. So you kind of need to figure out what works best for your server. So I'm not actually going to do 5 times. I'm going to do, let's say I'm going to do a max stack size of 200 for all components. So we do that just like that. All right, so now we've changed all the stack sizes for the things that we need to, or that I feel that we need to take care of for the tutorial purpose. The next one that we're going to go over is MagicLoot. So we also want to give our players more loot when they're smashing barrels and opening boxes. And same thing as StackSizeController. I've done another tutorial on this that might go into a little bit more detail than what we're going to do today. I'll post another card on the top right hand corner if you want to get to that video. But for right now, we're just going to go through here and make a couple of changes real quick, and I'll explain the changes as I'm making them. So the top highlighted line there is item list multiplier, and we've changed that to 5 times. So what this does is it multiplies everything that's on this list right here by 5 times. So whatever the player might find in a barrel or a box is going to be multiplied by 5 times if it shows up on this list. And yes, we can change this list to contain whatever we want. You'll see on here there's things like duct tape and bleach on there. Well, we don't need that stuff, so yes, you could take that out if you wanted to. The other section of this plugin that I've changed is I've actually enabled what's called extra loot. Okay, so what that does is, if you've ever played on a vanilla server, you've seen it happen before, where if you go inside of a just a regular brown box, you might only see 2 or 3 items in there. Well, with this extra loot section, we can change it to have as many items in there as we want. So for this example, I've changed it to a maximum of 10 items and a minimum of 3 items. So no matter what, the player is going to find at least 3 separate items in the box, up to a maximum of 10 items. All right, so now that we've made all the changes that we need to do for this example, I'm going to save this, I'm going to reload the plugin, and then I'm going to go in game and show you guys that the changes are actually taking place. All right, so here we are in the test server, and we're just going to go over and smack a couple of trees real quick and make sure that our gather rate has increased by 5 times, as well as our stack size. All right, so after chopping down, what was that, 3 or 4 trees, I'm not really sure, we have 6,700 wood, and as you can see, and it's stacking in the sizes that we predetermined. Now, just a side note here, my quick and dirty way of changing StackSizeController actually didn't work, and I had to go back in and do it manually. And like I said earlier, I have a more in-depth video that shows how to do that, which is my suggested way to do it. I was just trying to do it quickly for the purposes of this video. All right, so next up, we're going to chase down some loot and see what those loot boxes look like. We'll check this hemp plant here and see how much we get out of that. So we got 50 out of that instead of the normal 10. I don't really want to be dealing with these murderers. I'm not really sure why I put that C-bar on this server, because I knew that I would just be using it for this type of stuff. Alright, so after some searching around, I finally found a box. Point of note, right after you restart your server, MagicLoot doesn't take over right away, so it might take a little bit for your boxes to actually start generating. Alright, so this is what MagicLoot looks like now that we've made those adjustments. So as you can see there, we don't have the normal 3 items or 2 items sometimes, but we actually have 9 items in here and 25 scrap to boot. So as you can see here, very beneficial to have MagicLoot on a 5 times or any times gather rate server. All right, so that is all 3 of the plugins functioning as we would expect them to after we've made the changes to make it a 5 times gather server. So of course, these are just the very basics as far as changes goes. There are a lot of other plugins that I would make changes to in order to be more conducive with a 5 times gather rate server. Like you could increase how many homes your players can have and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things that you can make changes to. But like I said, this is just the very bare minimum changes that I would make in order to have a 5 times gather environment. And like I said at the very beginning, you can use the exact same processes and change it to whatever gather rate you want. It can be 1,000 times gather rate. It could be 1,000,000 times gather rate. I don't know why you'd want it that much, but you could. Just make sure you have stack sizes set up properly so that a person doesn't hit one tree and fill up their entire inventory and then spew a bunch of wood down on the ground, because that can happen. So I hope that answers some of the questions in regards to setting up a 5 times gather rate server. If you found the video helpful, remember to hit that thumbs up for me. It helps me out a lot. If you think there was something I should have added to this test server in order to demonstrate how a 5 times server should be, leave your comments down below, and I'll take that under advisement for future videos. If you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button. I'll put it right about there. And if you want to see other videos from the same playlist, all talking about tutorials, jump in that box right there. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.